get this wrong, and this isn't what you want? What if I'm missing signs you're giving me but I can't find? What if I miss your plan and the story I could have? I live inside these thoughts, and when they spin, they're hard to stop. What if you're bigger than all this? What if you just want me to jump in? Oh, I know I'm gonna go and get it wrong sometimes, but you're with me every step and you will make it right. Oh, I don't have to worry about my life. Oh, oh, oh. When every single moment here is in your hands, you knew that I was human when you made your plans. You're with me in the heart of every circumstance. So, oh, oh, I'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, I'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, you'll use it. What if your love is good and my future's held secure? What if my path is paved by pillars of your endless grace? What if you're bigger than all this? Bigger than all this. What if you just want me to jump in? Oh, I know I'm gonna go and get it wrong sometimes, but you're with me every step and you will make it right. Oh, I don't have to worry about my life. Oh, oh, oh. When every single moment here is in your hands, you knew that I was human when you made your plans. You're with me in the heart of every circumstance. So, oh, oh, I'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, you'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, you'll use it. I'm gonna get outside my head. I'm gonna listen for your spirit. I'm gonna walk in joy and peace. I'm gonna run this race with freedom. I'm gonna run this race with freedom. Oh, I know I'm gonna go and get it wrong sometimes, but you're with me every step and you will make it right. Oh, I don't have to worry about my life. Oh, 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 oh. When every single moment here is in your hands, you knew that I was human when you made your plans. You're with me in the heart of every circumstance. So, oh, oh, I'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, you'll be bold. Keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever comes, you'll use it. I'm stuck in a moment between fear and faith. He tells me to move, but it's comfortable to stay. Even in the valley, he will lead me through. I don't have to follow, but I want to. Forget all the old ways. God's doing a new thing.
Guys, make sure this is on. All right, welcome guys, welcome to the Breakout. I don't know if it makes sense to maybe shut those doors in the back, but just so we don't have folks like chattering, but guys, welcome. If you weren't at this one last time, which would be weird if you came to the same one twice, what breakouts did you guys do in the morning? Anyone want to shout? Justice? What was your takeaway from the justice talk?
Equal standard. There's an objective standard, and if there is a standard, there's a standard giver. And so
Yeah.
if you're going to make a claim to morality, you have to appeal to that objective outside.
Yeah. Social justice demands an objective standard. Yeah. And then which one were you at?
Archaeology.
How was archaeology? What was the takeaway?
You match the biblical text to a outside of biblical text.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool.
So cool. I wanted to go to all of them, but I couldn't go to any of them. So, guys, we're going to talk about a heavy topic in here, but it's one that I'm actually, I'm very excited to talk about with caveats. The core of this talk is why God's design for sexuality is good news for us. But I know that that is going to run head on into our culture's messaging around sexuality. But I don't think that means Christians shouldn't talk about it. We actually have to press in on sexuality because this is the question more than anything else our neighbors and our friends and our coworkers who don't follow Jesus are asking. And if we don't know how to respond to this, we're gonna be in trouble. But on the flip side, I've seen God meet people through this topic in ways that they never thought were possible. So with that said, I wanna start with just a few disclaimers. First of all, this topic is painful because none of us have done sexuality perfectly, right? My friend Sam Albury actually said, no one is straight in the sense that no one's sexuality is pleasing to God in and of itself. We all need Christ's redemption in our lives. He also said, the gospel is not God rewarding good people, but God being kind to bad people. Right? And that's all of us. So as Christians approach this topic, we need to have absolute gentleness, absolute humility. But there's hope too, because it means if we haven't done this perfectly in our lives, there's redemption. That said, if you disagree with me on any of this, I would love to talk. I really, truly would. I'd love to engage and see the world where you're at. But there's a few points I want to make today. Three major arguments that I think go against the lies of culture surrounding sexuality, and here they are. And I think if you can remember these, you will have talking points with your friends and neighbors and your coworkers who don't agree with you, right? And they are this. First of all, sex is never casual. Sex is never casual. Second of all, God designed marriage to protect and to rightly channel human sexuality. And third, sex is not the purpose of your life. So let's get into each of these. Starting off with, sex is never casual. Now, whenever we talk about something, there's an important question we have to ask. What is it for, right? So the question I want to ask is, what is sex actually for? Like imagine you're in a town hall meeting and someone gets up and they get on the podium and they're like, okay, we should ban widgets. We should ban every single widget. We need to ban them. What would hopefully be your first question? What's a widget, right? What's a widget? And what happens if we ban them? What does a widget do? And what happens if we let people keep all their widgets, right? You shouldn't weigh in with a big, strong opinion on widgets if you don't know what widgets are and what they're for. So what is sex for? And I'll actually ask that. Does anyone just want to throw out a few ideas that you might have about what sex is actually for? Procreation, thank you. It's wild actually how often, and I'm putting myself in this camp, we go around just thinking about sex and we don't actually remember, oh yeah, it's meant to like procreate, like create new human beings, right? So that's a good one, procreation. What else? Intimacy, right, connection. What else? Pleasure, absolutely. We talked about purpose and how God made everything good. Sex was God's idea, right? Sometimes people think Christians have a really low view of sex. That is absolutely not true. Christians have the highest view of sex and sexuality, which is why we're committed to the belief that sex is never casual. It's actually that we want to protect and guard something so good that God has given humanity that we should engage with this conversation. Those are some great answers, you guys. And I want to hone in on one element of that, and that's that there's no such thing as casual sex. Now, what I'm not saying is that people never think sex is casual, right? Plenty of people think that you can have casual sex. But I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of us either want sex to mean something, hope it means something to the other person, or spend an enormous amount of time regretting the meaning that it did have, despite our best intentions. Sex isn't casual because it wasn't designed to be casual. On a biological level, the purpose of sex is to make you trust another person enough to make a baby with them, then stick around after that baby's born, right? As the dad of a 1-year-old now, I mean, those first couple of months are the trenches, man. Like every 2 hours that baby needs to feed. We bottle fed, so, we were sharing the load. Gave me new respect for moms who are just breastfeeding and just soloing that. That's crazy. We need a foundation for a relationship between moms and dads that can survive adding a baby to the mix. Sex is one of the most powerful ways of bonding two people together. What happens to your brain during sex? The limbic system of your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. That's the part that, surprise, surprise, is driven more by instinct and emotion than by cold logic and reason. The brain region involving social judgments and social awareness slows way down. And the areas linked to self-awareness and self-inhibition slow down. Basically, your brain releases a gallon of chemicals. We got oxytocin. It's a huge pain-relieving chemical, right? It's also sometimes called the cuddle chemical. Moms' brains, for example, release a ton of oxytocin when they deliver babies and hold them for the first time, right? Because the mom has just undergone something fairly traumatizing. And your brain is saying, boom, good job. Way to go, mom. Enjoy the reward, right? Vasopressin is another chemical. It's all about fostering emotional connection. Here's what researchers have found. Vasopressin is actually stronger in men during sex. So it's about fostering feelings of emotional closeness with another person. Serotonin helps regulate mood and sleep. Basically, it's the chemical most associated with happiness. So your brain is literally turning some parts off, firing other parts up and saying, basically, it's time to connect. It's time to stop judging. It's time to stop criticizing. It's time to connect. Dr. Jennifer Sweeten's term for this is neural disinhibition. Right? Neural disinhibition. If you're particularly disinhibited in society, that could be a euphemism for being drunk, right? Sex kind of operates in the same way. It's incredibly difficult to make rational decisions when sex is involved. And these facts make sex by far and away one of the most powerful forces in the entire world. I don't know if you guys have thought about this. Like, how many lives have actually been devastated because of mishandled sexuality? How many people are stuck in a cycle of knowing a relationship is bad for them, but they keep coming back anyway? Your brain on all those chemicals experiences a total lack of self-control. How many people are suffering for months from a breakup because their bodies made a promise that they never intended to keep? There's a song by Bishop Briggs that says, if I'd known, you'd rip it apart. Oh, I wish I didn't get your name tattooed on my heart. Anyone know that song? It's awesome. Look it up. But we understand that sometimes our bodies make these promises. And if we're not prepared to keep them, it's a recipe for suffering. Sometimes the consequences are more severe. How many friendships have ended because of one moment of mishandled sexuality? How many 5, 10, or 20-year marriages have come to an end? How many childhoods have been devastated through divorce or abuse? How many hours of counseling are people undergoing right now as they wrestle with sexual trauma in their past? How many churches and ministries have closed? How many business partners have split up? How many people have been sold into literal slavery because of this one aspect of being human? How many wars have been fought? Think about it. How many people have literally been murdered because of one moment of mishandled sexuality? On paper, that doesn't make any sense, right? Why would someone in a 20-year marriage say, you know what, I don't care if this ends right now? But people do it all the time. One of the oldest analogies in the book is that sex is a lot like fire, right? Fire is good. It's how we cook our food. It's how we power, coal stations and stuff. We need fire and combustion to do life in the modern world. But the question is, how are we going to handle that fire? Because fire can be incredibly beneficial, or it can burn your entire house or even your entire city down. In 2012, I was a senior in high school in Colorado Springs. It's a very dry climate, and someone threw a cigarette on the ground and created the Waldo Canyon forest fires. And literally, a mountain of ashes and smoke billowed into the air above my hometown. It looked like we were living in Mordor. So naturally, my buddies and I were like, let's go play Ultimate Frisbee. So we all like ran outside and we were like, trying to play Frisbee. We were like, bad idea, back inside, right? And we found out later that what we were choking on was the ashes from about 500 homes that had been devastated by that fire. Fire out of control is a devastating force. But the good news, so sex is never casual. But the good news is that God has given us, to keep the analogy going, a fireplace to perfectly keep that fire in a way that it's actually gonna do good and not harm. And that fireplace is marriage. Marriage, rightly, it protects and rightly handles human sexuality. And I wonder if you've thought through each of these implications. This could be some of the most important information that you're able to bring to your non-Christian friends and colleagues. And I hope you're actually engaging in conversation with people. I hope you're asking questions enough to get to know people's story. And I hope that they learn to trust you enough to open up and maybe ask some questions of their own. And when that happens, I hope you're able to articulate a Christian ethos of marriage. Because guys, it is a good gift. Not just if you happen to be married. It's a good gift for everybody, because it keeps that fire in the fireplace. Here are some of the ways that it does that. First of all, marriage protects hearts. When we talk about love, we long for permanence. Right? There's a reason why on our wedding day we don't get up and say, we do say until death do us part, and we don't say until I stop feeling feelings for you and decide to move on to somebody else, right? It's like a lot less romantic if that's your custom wedding vows. Love demands permanence, or it's not love. I would almost say permanence is a definitional component of love. And every song, virtually every song ever written testifies to that. Here's just some of the few of the Billboard Top 50 of all time. At Last by Etta James. My Loneliness is Over. All of Me by John Legend wants all of you, or it might be loves all of you. All of Me loves all of you. Let's Stay Together by Al Green. I Will Always Love You by Dolly Parton / Whitney Houston. Pick your version. That's How Strong My Love Is by Otis Redding. Signed, Sealed, Delivered. I'm Yours, Stevie Wonder. Home, Let Me Go Home. Home is Where I'm With You. Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I Only Have Eyes for You, the Flamingos. Eternal Flame, the Bangles. I Can't Stop Loving You, Ray Charles. I Want to Dance with Somebody, but not just anybody, somebody who loves me. Yeah, it's okay. You guys can contribute. Dancing is fine, but you want to dance with somebody who loves you, right? It's not just the physical act of dancing. We want love, and love longs for permanence. So marriage protects people's heart. If you're not willing to back up your sexual self with an act of radical permanence, it's inappropriate to engage in sex. Sex is actually designed, or marriage is designed to protect hearts. Here's another element. Marriage tames men and dignifies women. Tames men and dignifies women. Now, I'm gonna speak in generalities here, okay? Because this is not, we're gonna talk about social studies, right? Society as a whole. This is not the experience of every individual man or every individual woman. But sociology tells us some pretty concrete ideas about how men and women tend to function when left to their own devices. There's a guy named Mark Regnerus with University of Texas at Austin, and his thesis is called The Economics of Sex, right? So he talks about how just like in any economy, the sexual economy is a question of supply and demand, right? And the fundamental question of the sex economy is, what price are men willing to pay in order to have sex? Right? Because left to their own devices, men tend to have a higher desire to have sex with as many partners as possible. Whereas women, by contrast, tend to want other things more, such as stability, responsibility, commitment, and emotional intimacy. So fellas, if you want to write down that word, emotional intimacy, gonna really help you in life if you get married someday. Women tend to want a stable partner, a responsible partner, a committed partner, an emotionally intimate, available partner. Men tend to want sex, speaking from a sociological point of view. So the fundamental question of the sex economy, again, what price are men willing to have in order to pay sex? In some cultures, sex is incredibly cheap. So picture Vikings go and they raid a village. And they take all the women home as captives. Here's my question for you. In that sex economy, is sex expensive or cheap? Cheap. Could be expensive because of the cost of battle. Sure. At risk of trivializing the atrocities the Vikings committed, though, I wonder how many dudes would feel more comfortable charging into battle and taking captives than asking a real live woman who could say no out on a date. Fair question. It's historically easier for men to just raid, pillage, and take whatever they want in groups with other men with the same goal than to go through the elaborate courtship rituals of wooing a single woman who they respect. Right? But that is a very thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that you're thinking through this, right? But no, in general, I think we would say that if Vikings raid a village and have a bunch of captives on their hands, the sex becomes very cheap. And here's the other question, are the women valued or devalued? Devalued. Let's think of another culture, one that is far away from the Vikings. I want you to picture a culture saturated in pornography. Everywhere you go, every device, it's being thrown at you from early ages, like 8 years old and on. What does it do to the sex economy when men can access a kind of sexual intimacy without ever having to go through the rigmarole of asking a real live woman out, let alone asking them to marry them, right? Is sex expensive or cheap? It's cheap. Are women valued or devalued? They're devalued. And another question that's worth asking is, what does a society saturated in pornography do to the men of that society? Yeah, you haven't. Say it again. You are. You're so able to raise hands.
It makes men objectify women.
Yeah.
And see them as people.
Yeah, men objectify women. That's right. Yeah, that's a common denominator in both of those, the Viking and the pornography-saturated culture. It rots holes in their brain. Yeah. Yeah, when sex is cheap, the men don't have to make anything of themselves to earn the right to be with a woman. There's a writer with Vanity Fair called Nancy Jo Sales, and she, a couple years ago, you should look this article up. It's called Tinder and the Dawn of the Dating Apocalypse. Totally secular author, feminist, like fourth wave feminist, but she just goes to bars in Manhattan and she's like talking to 20-something-year-olds who are all on Tinder. And here's some of what she writes. She interviews first a group of men. I've gotten numbers on Tinder just by sending emojis, says John, without actually having a conversation, literally having a conversation via emojis. He holds up his phone with its cracked screen to show a Tinder conversation between him and a young woman who provided her number after he offered a series of emojis, including the ones for pizza and beer. Now, is that the woman I potentially want to marry, he asks, smiling? Probably not. But Marty, who prefers Hinge to Tinder, is no slouch at quote-unquote racking up girls. He says he slept with 30 to 40 women in the last year. I sort of play that I could be a boyfriend kind of guy in order to win them over, but then they start wanting me to care more, and I just don't. I mean, I'll say this for Marty, he's being honest. Then she goes over to the girls on the other end of the bar, and she starts talking to these girls. It seems like girls don't have any control over the situation, and that should not be the way it is at all, says a girl named Fallon. It's a contest to see who cares less, and guys win a lot at caring less, says Amanda. Sex should stem from emotional intimacy, and it's the opposite with us right now. And I think it is really kind of destroying females' self-image. This article is so powerful because it's showing us the consequences of a sexually liberated society, something that so many people have wanted. It's actually changing the interactions between men and women. So in a society where sex is cheap, women are devalued. In other cultures, sex is very, very expensive. So when I married my wife, Hannah, I knew pretty early on I had found a gem, right? That's us on our wedding day, the happiest day of both of our lives, surrounded by our friends. She had 12 bridesmaids, you guys. I mean, I have a lot of friends, but I was like, whoa, you know? I thought I was gonna have to cut some guys. Now I'm like calling up dudes like, hey man, been a minute, you know, you wanna be at my wedding? It was so fun though. That was the best day of both of our lives to this point. But before we could get here to this moment, I'll just speak from my experience. I had to spend an enormous amount of time convincing not just Hannah, okay, but her parents, her extended network of friends, that I was good enough to be with her. We live at a college, Covenant College, and Hannah works there, and there were one professor in particular saw me, and he's like, hey, psst, come here. I was like, yeah? And he's like, come closer. I was like, yeah? He said, don't mess this up. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, no, seriously, we have guns. And I said, oh, okay, sir. We have a floor of guys who live above us in the residence hall where we live. And these guys they're like, so you're trying to date our mom? You know? And these are like basketball guys, like big old guys coming up like, yeah, what makes you good enough to date our mom, bro? Because Hannah's like the RD, like she's the team leader. Like they look to her, she does these events, she's counseling roommate scenarios, like she's in charge of that building. But it was awesome actually that so many people were like gatekeeping Hannah. Like they wanted to make sure I was a good enough dude, right? It was really clear that she was incredibly valued. And likewise in my life, everyone from my mom to my grandma would have told me, do this in the right order, buddy. Put a ring on it, right? Be careful who you marry. Pick the right one. I am so thankful that I lived in a subculture that taught me that sex was expensive. It made me, if I'm being honest, it made me a better man. God's gift of marriage is to protect and dignify the desire of women for emotional intimacy. And while we're at it, to call that same desire up in men. And it forces men to grow, take responsibility, and earn the right to be with a woman. If you're a dude, I just want to speak to the men for a second. Men and women have unique and difficult struggles right now in the sex economy. I just want to speak to the guys for a second. We live in a society that teaches us that sex is cheap. And what is it doing to the dudes? What is it doing to us? What is it doing to our character? You need to understand the impact that your actions have on the women around you. You can choose to be a destructive force in their lives, or you can choose something better. Our society has set the bar so ludicrously low for men. Like, try not to murder or assault anyone. You know, if you could maybe have a job, that'd be good. If not, we get it. Like, that's what society's telling men, right? And if you clear those bars, like, sweet. Okay, you're an amazing dude. Like, you're like a 10, actually, by culture standards. Whereas women are like, could you be a full-time model and a PhD and a mom, right? And stay in great shape. Like the bar is up here for women right now. That's just the facts of it. And I'm not trying to induce guilt or shame, fellas and ladies. We're living in a culture that we didn't create. But now we're responsible for what we do with it, okay? And there is a balance that is out of whack right now in the sex economy. So marriage tames men and it dignifies women. Here's something you might not have thought of though. Marriage protects friendship and innocence. Marriage protects every other relationship in our lives from the destructive influence that sex would have on those kind of non-sexual relationships. So going back to the fireplace analogy, our culture is so wacky. It basically says, be sexually liberated, treat sex like it's your identity, and the more sex we can add to everything else in society, the better. Like, has anyone ever seen one of those like really inappropriate Carl's Jr.'s ads? It's like a cheeseburger, it's like an ad for a cheeseburger, but they always have to have like a scantily clad woman. They haven't done this in a couple years, so I'm hopeful. But back in the day, Carl's Jr.'s ads, it was just like, stop, you know? And you can picture some marketing execs being like, you know what would make cheeseburgers even better? Sex appeal. It's like, gosh, stop. Like, this is so terrible and weird. Can we just like enjoy cheeseburgers? Why do cheeseburgers have to be sexy? We're so weird. Or the TV show Friends, right? Has anyone seen Friends? I mean, it's a hilarious show. I'm not gonna die. It's very funny. But one of the biggest lies Friends, because everyone on that show is hooking up with each other. one of the biggest lies of friends is that you can hook up with your friends and then stay friends with them afterwards. No, you can't, right? And if you do that, if you do try to do that, you're bludgeoning someone else's feelings, I guarantee it. They might pretend like they're fine, they're not fine. The worst lie that culture's told us is that introducing sex into platonic friendship is okay, it's normal, and it won't affect your friendships. Don't miss this, you guys. Culture's obsession with sex has actually diminished the kinds of love that are responsible for 90% of our real happiness on this earth. Like, we're so lonely for friendship. There's a blogger named Brett McKay, and his blog is called The Art of Manliness. It's like, how do you tie ropes and stuff. Great blog. But I came across this article from him, and it's called A Photo History of Male Affection. He writes this: in my unending search for just the right vintage images for our articles, I have looked through thousands of photographs of men from the last century. One of the things that I have found most fascinating about many of these images is the ease, familiarity, and intimacy with which men used to exhibit in photographs with their friends and compadres. Right, so men would go down to the photo parlor and just like have a photo session with their bro, just like holding hands, hugging on each other, cheek to cheek. Brett writes this: as you make your way through some of these photos, many of you will undoubtedly feel a sense of surprise. Some of you might even recoil a bit as you think, holy smokes, that's so gay. But, Brett writes, that actually proves the point. While we can't actually know the sexual orientation of the men in these pictures, the overwhelming likelihood is that they're heterosexual men. And we know that because, this was not a rare behavior. So I want to flip through some of these photos from this slideshow, and you can react to these however you want. Some of them are genuinely hilarious, okay? But this is a photo history of male affection. So guys like sailors on board a ship, just a group of dudes smoking pipes. Guys outside, Leaning Tower of Dudes. Two guys just showing genuine affection for them. And to them, this wasn't weird. I didn't know Abraham Lincoln was friends with a sailor like that, but that's cool to know. I know it's not Abraham Lincoln, but that's a good catch. As I was looking through these photos, you guys, some of them are hilarious. Like this one always gets me. I kind of want to rock up with my bro to the Sears photo salon and just, pull this move. That'd be awesome. As I was looking through these photos, though, I think it hit me how much we've lost. I mean, we are the weird ones. We have sexualized everything. And we've destroyed platonic friendship. Sometimes, unless you look back, you wouldn't know what we're missing today. And women have their own struggles. Again, like women, by God's grace, actually, it's easier to show affection. But I think a lot of men are desperately lonely. They don't have friends like this anymore. There's a journalist named Michael Hobbs. He is a gay, atheist Jewish guy from New York City. And he wrote an article in the Huffington Post called The Epidemic of Gay Loneliness. He found this: gay people are now, depending on the study, between 2 and 10 times more likely than straight people to take their own lives. They're twice as likely to have a major depressive episode. In a survey of gay men who recently arrived in New York, 3/4 suffered from anxiety or depression, abused drugs or alcohol, or were having risky sex, or some combination of the three, and that gay men have fewer close friends than straight people or gay women. It's one of the loneliest demographics right now. Why is that? Yeah, I don't want to say you can't have a friendship, right? And Michael Hobbs draws his own conclusions, but I actually think that for gay men in particular, the line between what's a platonic friend and what's an option, right, is blurred. And it actually has ruined, it makes it difficult for them to have real friends. And by the way, guys, if hearing those statistics about gay men doesn't break your heart and make you want to love your LGBTQ neighbors better than we're doing right now, I'd be tempted to say you don't understand the gospel. We need to love our neighbor because they are hurting. And we can do it by recovering God's, not just design for sex, but his design for friendship, normal, everyday affection, neighborliness, you name it, fill in the blank. We've lost all of these kinds of love. And by the way, if you're in here and you would say, I'm struggling with same-sex attraction, actually, there's so much hope for you. I just want to tell you about my friend Sam Albury. He is a guy who struggled with same-sex attraction his whole life, only ever been attracted to other dudes. He's one of my close friends. And can I tell you, I've almost never seen someone love Jesus like my friend Sam does. And I've also never met someone who has a richer or deeper understanding of friendship. I mean, his house in Nashville where he lives is awesome. He's got a couple of housemates, and they're just like, come stay with us, come hang out. Like, it's like Grand Central Station. Whenever you go there, you're gonna meet interesting people, right? You're gonna sit around a dinner table, eating delicious food, like going deep, like having that rich connection. Actually, Sam shows me, and reminds me, I should say, what friendship can be. And it's because he's been faithful to Jesus, right? So there's hope, right? We're gonna experience loneliness at times, but there's hope. But marriage protects friendship and innocence. Here's another piece of the puzzle. Marriage protects and rightly channels human sexuality. Oh, sorry. Yes, we're there. Marriage protects friendship. Sorry, marriage protects children, right? Sex is not casual if for no other reason that we've talked about, but one simple one. It has the possibility of bringing a brand new human being into the world. I already showed you a picture of Knox, but I can't resist. Here's another one when he was just like a brand new little nugget. I mean, this was hours after he was born. New humans are so fragile. They're so precious. They're so needy. They need a safe place to land when they get here. God gave them that safe place, and it's when their parents have a strong marriage, when it's a team of two welcoming that baby to the world. Yeah.
In a way, you can say a newborn baby is innocent and intimate, like
Right.
marriage should be.
That's right, yeah. It's interesting that a sexual union creates the least sexual kind of affection, but the one that is just, I mean, I can speak right now with a 1-year-old baby. My cup is overflowing. Like, this is awesome. It's the hardest work I've ever done. But it's crazy, actually, that even the purpose of sex is to create more people for non-sexual love to flourish, right? That's a great point. But God created, we have to remember that the purpose of sex is not about us. It's actually creating a stable landing place for these guys, the most vulnerable members of society. Psychologically, we know that moms and dads bring something totally different and totally vital to the table. Moms, for example, represent everything that is safe, comforting, nurturing, and gentle. From the first time you could hear anything, you could hear your mom's heartbeat and the sound of her voice, even inside the womb. Psychologists call mom a face to call home. Babies are so close to mom when they're born, they don't even know that they exist. They just see their face of their mom looking back at them, and that's their world. I want to show a clip that I think illustrates this, and Brian, this is the loud one, so, fair warning. Yeah, I'm not crying, you're crying. Dang, I've seen that probably like 100 times. Every single time I'm just like, it gets me. That baby has been like psychologically primed to expect comfort. It's baby and mom have just been through the most traumatizing experience of their lives, right? And the doctors immediately bring that baby to mom. Now, this was a C-section, which they couldn't put that baby right on the mama's chest. But even her voice, even those little kisses, like bring that baby. Just to a state of like knowing that he's cared for. God is so good in how he designed that. Dads too create something irreplaceable. Dads represent, again, in general, because men need to nurture and moms need to play with their kids, but in general, sociologically, men and dads represent risk, play, and protection. And you know this instinctively because every dad I've ever met, including myself, I don't know how this happened, takes that little precious baby and goes, woo, Knox loves that. He hasn't been dropped yet, but why do we do that? Why did I just had to do it. It was crazy. It was like this instinct, throw your baby in the air, Babies can recognize, this is crazy, the sound of their dad's voice too by the time they're born. But they're primed for a whole different set of experiences. Darcia Navarez sums up what babies learn in the first 18 months of life. Mutual eye gaze practices, right? Because dads represent the first other person that babies, if mom is home, dad is the first other. Like babies know that they're not dad, dad's not them, right? So they learn mutual eye gaze practices, how long, with whom, how to read postures, how to solicit for needs like food or play, turn-taking, greetings, joking, expressing affection, making friends. So much of that happens when men and women combined create an atmosphere where babies can learn. That's God's design. Now I need to pause here, okay? Christianity is not about all of us having this picture-perfect, cookie-cutter mold of the family. So many in this room have not experienced their biological mom and dad getting married, staying married. We don't have this like idyllic nuclear family setup. So many of us have actually been maybe raised by a single parent doing an amazing job, by grandparents, right? Some of us in this room are adopted. Someone stepped in and became our family when something went wrong at the beginning, right? And we have an incredible adopted family. Like these, I just wanna say here now, these are beautiful, God-given examples of what a family can be. We need to celebrate single moms who are doing an amazing job. We need to celebrate adoptive parents. Like those are every bit as much a family because they mirror the gospel. God is in the interest of reconciling and restoring all things. There's not a better example of that than adoption. But we also need to be honest. We can't afford to forget the design function of moms and dads. We can't afford to, because no matter what your experience is, your ability to be a mom or a dad is gonna be shaped by how important you think it is to stick out your marriage so that your baby has a safe place to grow up. Sex and marriage are not ultimately about us. They're about others. There are moments when a marriage needs to end, but our society is so drunk on individual liberty. We're so used to treating sex and even marriage like an amusement park that we forget our actions have an outsized consequence on the most vulnerable members of society, kids. If you are a Christian looking for a social justice cause, I can't think of a bigger one right now than the disregarded rights of kids to grow up in this kind of stable environment, right? We have to remember this, even if it's painful. So the critical rule about sex is this: unless you're in the kind of relationship that can handle having children, you should not have sex. Like, if you're not ready for that responsibility, then you have no business engaging in anything that could even possibly create a new human being. But guys, I wanna leave some room for Q&A, and I wanna end on this. Sex is not the purpose of your life. I wanna anticipate a really honest question here, which is, what if God is calling me to be single, What if I'm longing for this, or maybe I'm experiencing same-sex attraction, I'm experiencing unwanted desires, I don't know what to do with this. What if God's calling me to be single? And I wanna be upfront, you guys, sometimes that is a daunting ask from God. Sometimes it's our deepest fear. But I think what's really impacting that fear is that our culture treats sex and sexual liberation as the fundamental purpose of our life and tells us you will be lonely unless you're having sex. But guys, the enemy is such a liar because we're lonely anyway, Between now and 1990, 4 times as many Americans say they have no close friends. And here's the supreme irony for a culture that worships at the altar of sexual liberation. We're having less sex than ever. Like the amount of 22 to 34-year-olds who haven't had sex in the last 3 months has doubled since 2010. So culture talks this big game about like sex is everything, sex, your sexual passion, your identity, that's who you are. And ironically, we're having less sex than we've ever had. The enemy's lying to you about sex and sexuality. And the good news of the gospel is you don't have to live in that lie anymore. There's so much more to you than your sexual desires. We're the weirdos who want to centralize that. God is the creator who says there's so much more to you. Sex is not the purpose of your life. Actually, relationship and intimacy is. And so if you are called to singleness, whether it's for a season, right? I was called to singleness for 28 years before I married Hannah. Hannah, we love joking about this, she's 3 years older than me. She was called to singleness for 31 years before we met. But you know what attracted me the most to her when we did meet, right? She was not wasting her time. Man, I had never met someone more like vibrantly engaged in friendships and relationships than Hannah. Her maid of honor, Christy, said, there's 12 women up here and there's 12 more who would have gladly stepped in to testify to this woman's amazing ability to just be a friend, right? Like we had both, by God's grace, experienced the richness of life as single people. And yeah, I'm gonna be honest, there were some lonely nights, you know? There were some times where you're like, why? Why? Like if you had told 14-year-old Kasey, like, yeah, man, you'll be 28 when you get married, I'd be like, no! Because at my Christian college, everyone's just dropping like flies. They're just Twitter-pated, you know? And by the time I graduated, I was like, wow, there's nothing out here for me, I guess. Guess I'll die. But no, the Lord is like, guess you'll live, right? There's flourishing that can happen. And we need to recover that. Sex is not the purpose of your life. Relationship is. And the most important relationship is your relationship with your Creator. If you're sitting in here and you are wrestling with this element of your life in whatever way, I just want to remind you that the God who made you loves you. And that ultimately sex is one of the things that will pass away. Revelation 21 says, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. I'll end with this and we'll do some Q&A. If you're idolizing heterosexual marriage to fulfill all your problems, you're in for disappointment. Marriage is a good gift, but it's nothing compared to the giver of that gift. If you know him, you have everything you need for life and godliness. And I would challenge you now to start cultivating the kinds of friendships that when and if God has you destined for marriage to someone, makes you the kind of spouse that's fun to be around, right? And relationally equipped to handle marriage. You can start that right now. So with that, you guys, I'm sure there are questions. We have about 5 minutes before the other groups start coming back.